Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming in person and online. For those who don't know me, I'm EJ Monagulland. I'm a professor in the biology department and a member of the Leave at Hume Centre for Nature Recovery. And I'm really glad to introduce Dale Squires today. So Dale's an old friend. We've been working together for a decade or more now. And he's a super impressive person and incredibly interesting with a background in applied economics. So he did his PhD in applied economics at Cornell, but you'd done agricultural economics before that, and has worked at the sharp end of government policy for decades. So working with the Inter-American Tropical Tuna Commission, working on deep sea mining with the International Seabed Authority, and as a government scientist for the USA, helping them with various different treaties along to do with fishing and other kinds of marine rights. But what I like about Dale is that he's got a very inquiring, innovative mind and is always going out, reaching out into new areas and trying to find synergies and across disciplines. So I got to know him when he invited me to a workshop to bring terrestrial experience of payments for ecosystem services into a debate about bycatch economics. And that led into a whole range of collaborations. So we're really, really lucky to have Dale here today to talk about some super exciting work that he's doing at the moment around fairness in international treaty regimes, which I think we'll all find very interesting. So thank you very much, Dale.
All right. So this is enough. Right? So thank you so much for having me. Thanks for the nice things. EJ always says nice things because she knows I bring her chocolate from San Diego. And so today I'm going to talk about fair and equitable benefit sharing in international treaties, basically. If you look at a lot of the preambles, they require equitable sharing or fair and equitable sharing. And it's written by international lawyers, whom I respect a great deal, but they don't really go much further than saying fair and equitable. And I'm also going to be talking about the Common Heritage of Humankind, which is in the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS. And it's also, I'll be talking about it some more. So I fell into this a couple different ways. Most notably, I was working with I was working on deep sea deep sea fisheries. And I was down at a meeting in Mexico City, and the director of the International Seabed Authority, he and I hit it off. We got very similar backgrounds, and the previous director. And one week he said, Dale, come on down to Jamaica, take you a week. I've been working on this thing for years now. Turns out it's pretty complex. And so trying to operationalize fair and equitable. So I'm an economist. So I have to actually write an equation and put numbers to what the international lawyers talk about. And for both what's fair, what's equitable, and what's the common heritage of humankind. So this is the challenge. This is one of my favorite cartoons. All right. It's a miracle. I mean, what is that? How do we get it in a treaty? What is it? So I'll be talking about what fairness and equity is. I'll be drawing. There's actually an extensive literature that comes out of originates in philosophy. And then a lot of economists have picked up on it. They're actually mathematicians. They're not even economists. And they have made it rigorous. And if you can't take the philosophy and go from there, you have to take more rigorous concepts that the mathematicians have done. And that allows you to operationalize it. And it's also just a legal phenomenon in international law. And then again, the Common Heritage of Humankind, which is a principle of international law and ethics. The other purpose is empirical. And I got to say, I'm also exploring a concept called inequality of opportunity, or leveling the playing field. And it's central to the Common Heritage of Humankind. I also think it's a nice way to frame global north-south issues. So I'm exploring the concept. I may push it too hard beyond its applicability, but that's how you learn how useful the concept is. And so I've been operationalizing it for the International Seabed Authority. So I built up a large global database out of, you have to use official statistics. So it's out of World Bank, UN type data, and to try to come up with empirical estimates of things. I'm an applied economist. I try to put numbers on things. And then I will be talking about relative inequality aversion. And what that means is how much parties are averse to inequality, or how much equality do they want. And so I've gone in, I'm looking at revealed ethical preferences. I look at what countries have done, and then I try to put a number on that, and then I present it to the state's parties, and they can use that as a focal point. And I've done sensitivity analysis, and then if they like, they can change the number. If you go to in front of a bunch of countries or any kind of regulatory body and you ask them what you want, they have no idea, believe me. They only react to things. So you have to give them a kind of a framework and some numbers, and then the wheels turn. And then the last is so I did that for the United Nations, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and the Nagoya Protocol. And then out of that, I estimated a social discount rate, which is how it's like an interest rate, but looked at from the perspective of society. So like I said, I'm going to apply these lessons of fairness and equity that I've delved into on deep sea bed mining and on fishing. I'm going to try to apply it to the biodiversity treaties, biodiversity regimes, which I'm less familiar with. So again, this is kind of an exploratory lecture, very much. And then I'm going to consider, I'm not going to look at damages at all, like you find in climate change. And it's also a big concern with biodiversity. I've thought very little about that. That's how you allocate a cost. I've been concentrating on how you allocate a benefit. Like it's not going to be a comprehensive treatment of all the biodiversity regimes. I'll touch on them, and it's very much in mind, but it's not like a comprehensive treatment. Instead, I'm exploring what I believe are relevant fairness and equity concepts that come out of this very rigorous literature that ultimately originates in philosophy. And especially inequality of opportunity. I may be pushing that concept too hard. I don't really know. And I'll be considering divisible and cardinally measured good, meaning a single item that we can measure, such as monetary benefits or digital sequence information, something like that. So I'll first talk about, I'm going to actually start with international law, which is, if you're in the international arena, that's you always have to start there. It doesn't matter what your discipline is. It sets the hard constraints. It sets what definitions are. And I'll talk about a concept of international legal personality, which is critical to looking at the common heritage of humankind. Then I'll talk about that. And then I'll start talking about what do we mean by equality. I'll get into fairness. On fairness, I've listed 8, there's all kinds of fairness concepts. I've listed 8 of them, of which 4 I think is particularly germane to international treaties. I'll get into equity, both relative inequality aversion and then intergenerational equity. I'll talk about fair division, which is how we actually divide something up among the states parties to a convention. And then I'll talk about something very practical, using equity principles as a policy tool. So when you get up and you're dealing with states parties, you want to structure the discussions and the analysis in such a way that it's constructive and forces them to work off of principles, as opposed to just almost just being very subjective. And it changes the conversation into something that they're looking at trade-offs, and they actually have to give real reasons why they want something. And then I'll present some interesting empirical results on relative inequality aversion, social discount rates, and from revealed preferences on the Convention on Biological Diversity and the Nagoya Protocol. And then I've estimated the relative inequality of opportunity index for, I don't know, there's 8 or 9 of these treaties in the biodiversity regime complex. And So a major take-home message, and this is kind of slanted because this is a bit of an exploratory lecture for myself. But a major take-home message is it's a lot, we want to think about this fairness and equity a lot more than looking at things ex post. I do touch on that. How to, so looking at how equitable is the distribution. We also want to think about the fairness and the equity that goes into the actual framing of the rules. So that would be a deontological approach as well as a consequentialist approach. Fairness and equity will include impartiality. That I believe is the most important one, along with inequality of opportunity, and then relative inequality aversion. And I'll look at intergenerational equity, partly through sustainability funds like your Colley Fund, and then also social discount rates. And then another take-home message, like I said, I'm exploring inequality of opportunity, which has really only been used on the domestic level. Under international treaties, the idea is that fairness and effective opportunity depend not only on strict equality. Equality is much more than, again, this sort of ex post equality of outcome. It's really this whole structure of the international system. And do states parties have the capacity to actually participate equally? And I've quantified a great deal of that through this inequality of opportunity framework. So let's start with international legal personality. So in international law, states are what they call the primary subject. They sometimes call international law the law of nations. It's all about states. And international law talks about natural persons, which is us. And then they talk about juridical persons or legal persons. And the only thing that counts is juridical persons, all right? Once you're outside of humanitarian law, only juridical people count. And now international legal personality defines who possesses standing. That means who can go in front of an international commission and they have to pay attention to, actually legally pay attention to, rights, responsibilities, and obligations. So environmental groups or you as an individual citizen, you can go in front of an international commission. You do not, because you don't have international legal personality, you don't count in some sense, not legally. They give airtime to the groups, okay? But they don't participate in a legal sense and in the decision making. It's very frustrating to environmental groups. I've listened to them for years with the Seabed Authority and also with regional fishery management organizations. That's international organizations. And it's very frustrating for environmental groups or even civil society more broadly because they want their voices heard, but they don't have international legal personality. And nature does not either, all right? There's ways of introducing it, and we're starting to do that domestically. And then individuals and international organizations are a juridical person, and they are derived by actions of states. Only states count. And if you're a person under humanitarian law, or if you're even an international organization, United Nations is actually a juridical person derived by states. States have given it authority. So the implication is that only states have the legal capacity to receive benefits and also even to present, to interact formally. Any operational benefit mechanism, you have to benefit to the states. So you might be concerned about nature, you might be concerned about indigenous peoples, you might be, in my case, I was concerned with cosmopolitans, humankind, but only states can receive it. Now, it turns out to shape things in a much bigger way than you think. And then also in the international arena, what states do is their business. And so you might be allocating benefits to states. I mean, I've been out in atolls or out in states on treaty negotiations in the Pacific and out to parties in the fishing minister's house. It's a lot nicer than his salary would support, okay? And it's pretty clear where the money's coming from. You don't make those kinds of issues don't matter in the international arena. So now in the biodiversity world, which is different than my world, the indigenous peoples, local communities are important. And they're trying to give recognition and representation, and they do not have primary legal personality. They're receiving a secondary or derivative legal personality as by the actions of states, but they are not the primary actors. All right, so let's turn our attention now. So the point is, the only states parties or states have international legal personality. That's the main point of that last. So let's look at the Common Heritage of Mankind, which is a principle of ethics and international law. And so it establishes that resources in the area beyond national jurisdiction. So you can think of outer space, you can think of moon, you can think of beyond 200 nautical miles for the exclusive economic zone or the continental shelf. So all those would be areas of what we call area beyond national jurisdiction. So under this common heritage principle, it belongs to all humankind. Remember, I had to define this. The lawyers leave it at that, all right? You got to go a step further. And they have to be managed for the benefit of present and future generations. So you can't just think of the current generation. It's not subject to national, the resources are not subject to national appropriation, and resource use does not establish the basis for claim. So you can think of during the gold rush, miners go out and they establish a claim. And then they get, it turns into a property right. That doesn't work in this world. You can start, you have to go through, in this case, International Seabed Authority for mining claims. You can have a use right, but it's not a property right. Core elements include a non-appropriation by states, peaceful use, environmental protection, and the obligation to share benefits equitably, with particular attention to the interests and needs of developing states. That's in Articles 82 and 140 of Law of the Sea. Now, this is really the punchline. No state has sovereignty or even sovereign rights in the area beyond national jurisdiction. That's held collectively by humankind. Now, where is it? So it's in Law of the Sea, Part 11, which deals with the implementing agreement dealing with the seabed. It's in the Moon Treaty, but it's signed by, it was only ratified by 12 states, no spacefaring nation, so it's going to go nowhere. The BBNJ Treaty, so it's partially there for genetic resources. They haven't even begun to think about how to operationalize it or what it actually means. And there it's the BBNJ Treaty, along with Article 11 and one other treaty, are really parts of Law of the Sea. Law of the Sea is the overall constitution of the oceans, and these are all subject within that framework of UNCLOS. In the Outer Space Treaty, so there the Common Heritage Principle shows up in weakened form in other treaties, but nowhere, but always retaining sovereign rights by states. In the UNCLOS, the states do not have sovereign rights, but all the other treaties, and the Moon Treaty, they don't either. But like I said, the Moon Treaty is irrelevant. The Outer Space Treaty, you have the Province of All Mankind, Antarctic Treaty, the Interests of All Mankind, the World Heritage Convention, Heritage of Mankind, the United Nations Framework for Climate is the common concern. All of these preserve state sovereignty and do not impose benefit sharing. They retain non-appropriation or share a concern, but you don't, even that's not going to go anywhere in outer space. You've seen the Artemis Accords. I think parenthetically, I think spacefaring nations are going to go out, start utilizing resources, and the rest of the world's going to do the same thing that happened with deep seabed mining. They're going to say, what about us? So the battle in outer space is yet to come. All right, that one's very much to be determined. So I had to operationalize humankind. I mean, what's humankind? I mean, really. So I had, I had to put it in an equation and put some numbers to these things. So now it includes individuals, that is natural human persons, that's us, current and future generations. And so I defined it as cosmopolitan individuals. Cosmopolitanism are citizens of the world. It traces back to Diogenes, Cicero, many others. So cosmopolitan individuals of current and future generations residing in an international organization's states parties, so it's the population in a country, regardless of nationality. So remember, they're citizens of the world. So it doesn't matter what your citizenship is. And the reason I say residing in the states parties, because again, you're dealing with an international organization, and only the states parties that have ratified it count. So again, international law sets hard constraints. Now, so this set up a central tension. Is always present when you deal with these international issues. But when you're dealing with the common heritage of humankind principle, it's front and center. And that's the tension between, in this case, the resource owning cosmopolitans. Remember, the cosmopolitan individuals, us, we collectively own the resources in the area beyond national convention out in the oceans, all right? We own it, all right? But we're represented by, we don't have international legal personality. We're represented by states parties. And so only they can receive the benefits. And so the sharing rules you have to balance the benefits going to the cosmopolitan individuals, us, populations, with the states parties. So I first started off just naively setting up ownership for cosmopolitan individuals. So I measured that by the share of population of all states parties that a particular country has. And so I did some other things. And I went down to Jamaica and I presented it to the finance committee. And you had India, it's a large country. So it got, over 30%. And so the Indian guy was sitting there like, grinning like a Cheshire cat, all right? Didn't say a word because everything's going his way. But then you had Tonga there. All right, Tonga got like 0 and then like 7 or 8 zeros before it even gets anything. Or Niue has 11,000 people. All right. And so these representatives of these states parties, they're looking around and go, that's not fair. So then I realized, my God, I'm dealing with this conflict. Cosmopolitans that own the resources residing in states parties, but states parties have the international legal personality. So I'm balancing equity and fairness in the end between states parties and the individuals, the cosmopolitans that reside in there. And it was a balancing act the whole time. So now we turn to equality of what? So there's a Nobel Prize winning economist and philosopher, Amartya Sen. He wrote a very famous paper, basically saying, what do you mean by equality? So I'm going to, and then it was Cohen, all right? Cohen was a famous philosopher from here, from Oxford. The other guy was Richard Arneson from UC San Diego, where I'm from. And then there were a couple others, all right, that were important. Oh, well, John Rawls and Ronald Dworkin. So Cohen wrote this really famous paper in 1989. And he said, he talked about currencies of justice, and he was talking about two equality of outcome, that is sort of a consequentialist distributional impact, and then a deontic approach, which is equality of opportunity. So it's just what it sounds like. I'll be using inequality of opportunity more often than equality of opportunity, but so just be aware it's basically the same thing. Now it's a fairness concept, and I'm going to distinguish between fair or justifiable on inequality and unfair inequality. So, let me explain that. So outcome inequalities are unfair if they're rooted in circumstances beyond an individual's control. Now, that's really important. So on the individual level where this concept's been applied before, this is the first time it's been done internationally. We can think of a person's neighborhood, their race, their gender, what income class they come out of, maybe even the age they're born in. And then we say all countries have various policies trying to level the playing field. All right. And so we would say that if you're born on the wrong side of the tracks, as we'd say in my country, we would say that's unfair. All right. So this is unfair, unjustifiable inequality. But there's also people or countries, individuals have responsibility for their actions. Now, it gets metaphysical, but I'm not getting into that. But people have some kind of control over their actions. And so you can line people up and give them the exact same starting point in life, same background. I have a twin brother, okay? And we shared a room for 18 years, and we did different things. All right. That's due to responsibility and effort. Now you can get in, you can take these arguments, say it's due to genes, all kinds of stuff. We stop, we don't go that far. All right. And so we have unfair inequality due to circumstances beyond individuals' control. And then we have natural rewards that come to people for the responsibility and effort. So then we say that individual inequality due to this unfair inequality due to outcomes or circumstances beyond people's control, they should either be eliminated or compensated. And that's what we do through various programs to level the playing field. In my country, we have things like, we don't do enough, but it's all going to war, but those are different issues we can talk about over drinks. So we have things like Head Start, where we would take kids from disadvantaged backgrounds and try to give them exposure to training and so forth. So now it's important, we're leveling the playing field. In principle, we're not leveling down. We're trying to bring everybody up. And so this individual, I'll use this symbol sometimes for inequality of opportunity when I write. So it's a fairness concept. Now, for the Common Heritage of Humankind, I went back and read what I believe is the single most important piece ever written on it by a guy named Wolfram in 1983. He was an international law of the sea jurist. And I'm not going to read all that, but I interpret what he basically said is that many of the states parties, because they own it, or at least their cosmopolitans do, they could not mine due to circumstances beyond their control. It's just like the spacefaring nations now. There were a limited number of states parties that could go out and mine the seabed. Same thing with outer space. And that's why I think we're going to see this pop up once they actually start exploiting outer space. We're going to see a repeat of this. Countries have done the Artemis Accord saying that we can go out and claim things, take sovereign rights, we can exploit the resources, and you're going to see a pushback from humanity. Just like you saw with the deep seabed mining. So let's turn our attention to some fairness concepts. There's many, many, many fairness concepts. And I only relied on one from this really rigorous literature, okay? And starting with philosophers and the mathematicians who then took those concepts and tried to explore them in a rigorous manner by various criteria. And so first will be impartiality, this equality of opportunity, which extends intergenerationally, no justified complaints and proportionality. And the reason I draw this red line is I think these are the four that I think are actually really practical. These are four that are, well, this is practical too, but in a different way I'll come to. But envy-freeness, which economists love, I don't think is applicable. Solidarity and consistency, I mean, these are nice, but I don't think they really impact the outcome in a meaningful way. So impartiality, I believe, is central to fairness, in which, now, under international law, all states have juridical parity. That means every state's the same. All right, and so parties. This says that parties or applications, if they look alike, they should be treated alike. And so in international organizations, what you want is a impartial procedures and consistent application of rules to all states parties. Brian Barry, which I think was at Oxford, he said fairness is what can be freely agreed upon by equally well-placed parties. He has a book called Fairness, anyway, Impartiality. It's something along those lines. Now, so now here's a question. I mean, so I've been on, so our state's treated impartially in these international organizations. I don't know about where the real money is, like the World Trade Organization or the World Health Organization. I know the oceans, okay? So I'm only arguing there. I've never been in plenary or conference of parties and CBD or any of those, and some of you have. I don't have experience here. But in my ocean experience, I've seen that small and large states parties are treated alike. I've seen little tiny states shoot down the big states. All right. I'm part of a 800-pound gorilla national delegation. I was talking to this friend of mine that was the previous director of the International Seabed Authority and an architect of a major largest tuna treaty in the world. He had the same thing. You've seen the little states have this, really, they can exert as much power as the major ones. I was talking about a month ago to some Chinese colleagues of mine, again, oceans. They say the same thing. So when I get into an academic audience, nobody believes it's possible. Okay. So who knows? All right. But my experience has been, and I had it happen to me. I did a lot of negotiation. I developed a fishery management plan, got shot down by some Central American states that hardly had an industry. All right. And the countries with the biggest industry, Ecuador in this case, they desperately wanted this plan. So I don't know, but my experience has been small states in the oceans, anyway, in my world, have a lot of parity. So now that leads to a concept called fair bargains, and which leads to impartiality. So if you have, so these international organizations are voluntary and self-enforcing, because in the international arena, only states have the international legal personality and are the primary subjects of international law. So, and most of them, the decision making is either by consensus or unanimous democratic voting. I think all of your biodiversity treaties are that way. And the International Whaling Commission is not, it's a supermajority. And I think the BBNJ is a supermajority, but I'm not positive. All right. So this is called a fair bargain when you have this kind of decision making. And then that somebody's mathematically proved it equals to a definition of impartiality based on logic. So this means that allocations to states parties, if they're arising out of an international organization, can potentially be fair shares. All right, depending if it's impartial. Now you can argue there's power asymmetries entrenched through path dependence when they were writing the rules, writing the treaties. If those states parties were overwhelmed by the big ones, weaker parties may go along, reflecting genuine unfairness. Again, it's not my experience, but who knows? All right. And then Sin, this economist philosopher, he had a concept called open impartiality, fair bargains, impartiality, democratic consensual decision making, organizations open to all parties. All international organizations are open to any state's party in the world, okay, if they want to ratify the treaty. And organizations' deliberations as structured deliberative process and open public reasoning, which is what you see in these organizations, across borders are consistent with what he calls open impartiality. So my takeaway here is there's impartiality. I believe it's one of the two most important, or one of the four most important fairness concepts. And that leads to fair bargains, fair shares, all right, in allocations. You can argue that, you can argue against it, but my experience has been it holds in the realm I've dealt with. Then we have the famous one of proportionality, where we're going to allocate resources, benefits, whatever, in proportion to the differences in the parties' claims. And we're going to treat the units of the claim or liability equally, not the state's parties, it's your claim. And this is Aristotle's equity principles out of the Nicomedean Ethics. It's impartial. It's also collusion proof. And what that means is you can, well, I was doing fishing, multi-vessel fishing companies. So I could allocate shares of fishing opportunities to a company and they can rearrange it, all right? And it's not going to impact anything. So, or countries can combine and dismember, and it doesn't impact the proportional claims. So CBD, the benefit sharing from the DSI is proportional. There's a concept, no justified complaints. So allocations plausibly satisfies this fairness criteria. No party can reasonably identify an alternative that would make it better off without violating shared principles such as impartiality or solidarity, or hurting another state's party's allocation. And this is the core of a cooperative game in game theory. Envy freeness, this is the economist's favorite one. I don't think it applies here. It says no user should prefer another user's allocation, that you should, when you value them. I think I don't see how you can't have that in the world either. So I just missed this one. Then there's solidarity, basically says everyone's going to work together and no one's going to get hurt. I'm not going to spend time on this. Consistency says everybody should be treated alike, large parties, small parties. Okay, now let's turn to some justice concepts. And again, there's all kinds of, like fairness, there's all kinds of concepts of justice. I've gone through and cherry picked what I think are relevant ones. Others, you may have other concepts that you think are important. I'm going off of what I see has been applicable in the world I live in, and trying to think also how it applies to the biodiversity regimes. So this Sen, again, I like this guy a lot. He's really practical. He has something called realization-focused comparative justice. You compare actual outcomes rather than what a just society is. There's a concept called local justice, and that says, what's the justice in an organization as opposed to society? And so we're not worried about what's a just society. We're thinking about just the organization that we're dealing with. We're going to prioritize reducing manifest injustice over defining what a perfect organization should be. Again, I live in the world of international organizations, and I read the literature. And I see a lot of complaints. All right, I was in a meeting on deep sea mid mining last week. All right, and there was a big shot from NOAA, which is the U.S. dealing with the ocean. Oh, she was going on and on. I think these things run pretty well. When you actually figure out how hard it is to get countries to come together and agree on something, you have no idea how hard that is. And so I read this literature and everybody's complaining about it. You know, it's kind of a glass half full, or half empty. All right, to me they look pretty good. So, and then it would use public reasoning, democratic deliberation, which is what you see in international organizations, to resolve the conflicts, come up with improvements. So procedural and distributive. So procedures, do we have a fair, impartial procedures? Everybody's treated with parity. Equals are treated equals. And then distributive justice that's some kind of fairness of both the process and the outcome. Recognition. This doesn't show up in my world. In the biodiversity world, it shows up when I read the treaties. So recognition justice, and so this is respect for the inclusion of diverse cultures, identities. So this is the indigenous communities, the local communities that plays prominent parts in the CBD. It's not a part of public international law. It's just something that these regimes have decided is really important. Compensatory justice. This is corrective justice focused on compensating parties for past harms. This is where I believe the compensation for inequality of opportunity fits. Epistemic justice. This also shows up in the biodiversity world. Fairness in knowledge, production, validation, and use. There's multiple forms of knowledge. So this is, you see it in all the treaties, the importance given to indigenous and peoples, local communities, gender, and so forth. It's not part of international law per se. It's part of treaty law because it's within the treaty. And then there's a concept of international pluralist justice. Again, Sen came up with it, and a guy at Harvard, Risa. And what they said, they looked around and they said, we have cosmopolitans, right? And there's a whole framework out there on cosmopolitan justice. And that's really important in humanitarian human rights law. And so, citizens of the world. And then so that would be cosmopolitan justice. And then we have states parties, the primary subjects of international law. That's called international justice. So in the Common Heritage of Humankind, and I believe anytime we're dealing with the area beyond national jurisdiction, we're dealing with this international pluralist justice, where both parties count. And I remember I said, when you're dealing with the BBNJ, the area beyond national jurisdiction, you have this tension between cosmopolitans, humanity, us, and states parties. And we're going to pay attention to outer space, because this thing is going to be central. Right now, you have the Artemis Accords. No one's talking about this. This thing's just started. So equity. So there's just two core concepts. This relative inequality aversion and an intergenerational equity. So relative inequality aversion is how much parties dislike inequality in the distribution of resources, income, or wealth. So we have our states parties, the different countries, and it's whatever they're the only ones that are the primary subjects, and it's whatever their belief is on how unequal it is. And then we have intergenerational equity. That's a principle of fairness between generations. It ensures that the current generations meet their needs without compromising that of future generations. Again, that's really ambiguous, right? You have to think about how to operationalize it. It's the core concept of sustainable development. Now, how to implement. So this is what I've done. And I've been dealing more with exhaustible resources and the idea of sustainability. When you get into the biodiversity world, where you have a lot of the resources are renewable, some are effectively exhaustible, then you get these sustainability constraints. In my world, we use maximum sustainable yield. But anyway, so I go to Apartha Dasgupta Sustainable Development. So as we draw down from natural capital, which is minerals or biodiversity or species or the environment and deep seabed, we want to take the proceeds from that and put it into other forms of capital, financial capital, human capital, physical capital. And you would put that into a sustainability fund. And these things are very, of course, prominent in the biodiversity world. The Kali Fund. And in the International Seabed Authority, they're going to take the royalties and put them into the Common Heritage Fund. The Plant Treaty has one. The BBNJ has one. And then the other one is social discount rates, which are how we value the present versus the future. Think of it as an interest rate, but for society as a whole. Then we get into fair division. So how do we allocate something? Well, this is called these mathematicians that have looked at it. It's called a claims problem. So we're going to allocate according to an individual's claim on a benefit. And there's all kinds of basis of claims. When you look at international treaties, or the resolutions in which they're talking about allocation, they come up with all kinds of specialized stuff, paying your dues. I don't know, I forget all of them. But most of them you can abstract into these ownership, efficiency, precedent, which is historical use, need, poverty alleviation, merit, just deserve. Most of the time you can put it into these, classify them. And then there are ways to think about it. The philosophers, the economists have thought about it. Some have thought about how to operationalize this stuff. So when you're looking at these things and you listen to all these things that these parties have written, they don't put it and classify it in these terms. It's very concrete and treaty specific. But most of the time you can abstract and put it into something more general. Precedent is really, really important, historical use. So fair division, it's a theory about how you fairly allocate stuff. The two rules, there's a number of rules. The two that are most prominent are proportionality and equal division, which is just what it sounds like. And then there's other rules, constrained equal awards or losses, which that might be relevant for you guys. And then there's also priority. We can place priority in one party or another, which I'll come to in a moment. Now, this is really important. You don't see this in the literature. This is what I've seen through practical experience. There's really hard constraints to this fair division. So there's public international law in general, and then the treaty, the actual provisions of the treaty. You have the juridical parity of states parties, little states, big states, poor states, rich states, have the same vote. This international legal personality, the common heritage of humankind, in my case, decision-making. So we have this open impartiality, Pareto efficiency, which is there has to be an aggregate gain and no party can lose. And then individual rationality, which is related to the Pareto efficiency. So each party and coalition of parties has to receive its disagreement payoff that comes out of bargaining theory. And this is what I ran up against when I was designing this fishery management plan for the Eastern Pacific. There were these Central American states, and they wouldn't go along with it because they had a disagreement point. They weren't going to lose anything. They were actually going to be marginally better off. But they had a disagreement point. They wanted more fishing opportunities. And the whole point of the plan was to reduce it. And if somebody did, and I calculated what the benefits are, the gaining states could have paid off those states, and they should have done a side payment, but they didn't. So we shot down. And then we come into redistribution mechanisms. Now, this is really, really tricky. I'm not talking about how we compensate for loss on the polluter pays principle. I don't deal with that. That's climate. It's important in biodiversity. I've given very little thought to it, so you probably know more than I do. But you certainly can't do lump sum taxation like you do in a country. You can't come in and lay a tax on somebody because you come back on Pareto efficiency and individual rationality. If you try to directly tax a party, they're going to go, no, I'm not going to take a loss. And in this democratic consensual voting, they're going to say, no, can't go anywhere. It's really a hard constraint. So when you're giving benefits out where there's no precedent, then you can use these distribution weights. And there's two ways so what you're doing is you're going to give some parties by some criteria more weight than other parties. So it's a redistribution from the wealthier to the poor, however you've defined it. All right. And there's two major ways of doing it. One is the classic economics approach based on utility, where we're going to take let's say the mean or median per capita gross national income of all the states parties, and then divide it by the states and individual states parties. And if you're poor, that ratio is going to be greater than 1. If you're rich, the ratio is less than 1. And we're going to raise it to an exponent of a progressivity parameter. And you can supercharge it or you can tamp it down. The other one, and the one I came up with, is using this inequality of opportunity, which is germane to the common heritage of humankind. And so there I calculated unfair income, unfair per capita income, and compared it to either the mean or median of all state unfair income for all states parties. I did a statistical test. The distribution is not normal, so I used a median instead of a normal. And then what we do, you can take your benefits, and let's say it's proportional allocation in my case. So I'm dealing, it could be historical fishing catch in my world, historical fishing catch, historical fishing days, or proportion of population for the deep seabed mining. And so that's proportionality. And you would take, let's say, a country's proportion of population and multiply it by this weight. And if the state is comes from more unfair inequality compared to the median, they're going to get more. So you're going to get a transfer from those that have less unfair circumstances. Now, also, when you allocate these things, it took me a while to realize this. All right, it's an index. All right, you have biodiversity index. We have the consumer price index. Indexes are nothing more than a way to aggregate individual units. And there are all kinds of index numbers, and some with certain properties. Geometric mean is widely used. The Human Development Index is a geometric mean, and it has nice properties because you can use different units of data. You don't have perfect substitution between the different individual variables, and is widely accepted. And so if you have a level of the amount we're allocating, so this would be a proportion of population, or in my case, proportion of fishing days that you've historical catch or historical output or something. This is our distribution weight. And I've talked about either the classic utility one or the unfair inequality of opportunity. And this is just whatever variable. It might there's ways of incorporating need or merit and stuff like that. And so you just raise, and M's the number of parties. And so you just raise each one to 1 M. If there's 3 parties, this would be a 3. And you multiply them together. Now, you typically want to allocate by shares. And because the thing you're trying to allocate, royalties, fishing opportunities, royalties out of the Kali fund, it's not going to be the same every year. Okay, so you want a consistent allocation rule. So you end up creating a proportion. You take an individual country's amount and divide it by the sum of everybody. And that gives you a proportion between 0 and 1. And then you would multiply that by the amount to be allocated in each time period. So again, we're coming back to this balancing. We have these deontic rulemaking cosmopolitan inequality of opportunity in a sharing rule in the deep sea in the common heritage of humankind, balanced by the states parties consequentialist equality of outcome. States want equality of outcome because this juridical period. I mean, this is what I've seen. But there's but also we have this fairness concept of inequality of opportunity. And I believe that's very central to global North-South things. I was at a workshop in SET. We were looking at the Indian Ocean Tuna Commission. And I've spent a lot of time in the Western Central Pacific on treaty negotiations and dealing with small and developing states and coastal developing states. And universally in the Indian Ocean and in the Western Pacific Ocean, these countries are saying we've had inequality of opportunity to participate in fishing. In my part of the Pacific, it's very different. It really doesn't hold. Now, I'm almost done. We have fairness and equity principles as negotiating tools. Now, this is really important. See, talking to countries is like herding cats. And they all got different kinds of ideas, and there's posturing, there's all kinds of stuff going on. So you have to bound these guys, and you have to give them focal points. Well, equity and fairness principles do that. And you're going to get a pluralist justice. There's many different senses of what's fair. It's different states parties have different senses of what's fair and just. And they're valid, okay? Because there's different parties with different interests. It's completely valid. So your justice is going to be pluralist. It's going to be a combination of fairness and equity principles. And you have to balance them somehow. And it's a mishmash, just like making sausage, all right? There's no great formula for doing that. So the art of doing that is you use these equity and fairness principles. So when I was talking to these countries, I'd say stuff like Aristotle's equity principles. And it's in Chinese philosophy too, all right? And then basically I'm saying, go argue with Aristotle. Don't argue with me, man. I'm just, crummy economist, right? You guys you argue with Aristotle. And so what you do is you start to bound the negotiation space, and you're creating focal points. And that changes the whole tenor of the debate. Instead of all these parties making these claims, I think this and that, all right? You're bounded, and you change the tenor of the debate. Now they have to come up with reasons for why, and they have to look at trade-offs. And one of the most important things out of economics is looking at trade-offs. And so they're not just staking out claims, they have to explain why in terms of rational principles. Why are they doing this? You change the whole tenor of the debate. So let me finish off with some empirical results. So I just literally, the last couple of days, calculated the relative inequality of opportunity for states. It's been done, the literature looks at individuals out of surveys and in countries. So I looked at it in terms of states, and I built a database mostly out of the world. You have to use data that everybody agrees on. So you work with World Bank, UN, International Labor Organization, like that. And then anyway, so I calculated this. So I'm comparing unfair income to observed income by an equity index. I'm taking a ratio of 2 equity index. And what these numbers are showing is that almost all the income would be due to circumstances beyond parties' control. All right. This hasn't been peer reviewed or anything, so who knows? Sorry. But the number is large. This week I was down at London School of Economics talking to the key guy on individuals. And I don't really have an argument against it, but it's never been peer reviewed by anybody really poking holes in it. But I think it'll work. Now, out of that, and so I calculated it for 35 treaties or regimes, and plus the entire world. And so out of that pattern, I just showed you these were the biodiversity treaties I looked at. CBD, Nagoya Protocol, that plant treaty, CITES, the Ramsar Conventions, the CMS, and the Desert Treaty, all right? It's actually somebody trying to sell me. I know. All right, so the biodiversity regime complex appears less as isolated treaties than components of a single evolving constitutional order. And I use that constitutional order in the sense of people like Ann Peterson, other international lawyers that are talking about public international law. For global ecological stewardship, it's unusually normatively coherent because the estimates of inequality of opportunity are coherent. Even though look at all the differences in treaty purposes, institutional design, regulatory instruments, the conventions differ in a lot of ways, but you see this coherence in the numbers. The biodiversity regimes seem to, based on these inequality of opportunity, seem to be based into two: the broad conservation and ecological treaties like CBD, CITES, and Ramsar, and regimes that are going to govern access to economically valuable biological resources and distribution. And so these are different than stewardship treaties. And so the Nagoya Protocol, BBNJ, and the Plant Treaty. And then I took 4 treaties. I couldn't do all of them. It wouldn't work statistically. I took CBD, Nagoya Protocol, CITES, and CMS. And I decomposed the unfair income into its sources. And so this is what I got. So we have demography, which I measured by percentage, by population, and by how urbanized a country is. Natural capital, that's 4 variables. I included the size from the Seas Around Us project. I included the size of the exclusive economic zones and the primary productivity. I had a percent of forest, percent of land, vulnerability, which is that Notre Dame vulnerability index. And I think there was one other component in it. Geography, which is regions of the world. Governance. This is the World Governance Index that World Bank did. I took everything and I took geometric mean. There's 6 components. I took geometric means for each component and averaged it over the last 4 years, and then for the 4 years previously. And everything's geometric means. Infrastructure, percentage of electrification, percentage of internet, and I think water. Some of the variables are just by what has enough observations. I had to impute multiple imputations with complex, what do they call it? It was called mice to impute the missing observations. I also used machine learning, random forest approaches, which I'm going with mice, and then I'll do a robust checkness with machine learning. Human capital. So I took mean years of schooling and life expectancy. Again, that was partly chosen out of what has enough observations. And then economic capacity, which is where a country ranks on a percentage wise. And you can see, first of all, just by the numbers of inequality of opportunity, most of its circumstances. I mean, who knows? This hasn't been peer reviewed. And you can see it's really factors beyond any kind of control: capacity, geography, demography, vulnerability. And that just shows you compared to the global. It says ISA, but it's actually the biodiversity regime. And it gives you a sense of this is the biodiversity regimes versus the global. Same thing. Infrastructure counts. On relative inequality aversion, I went into the UN, CBD, and Nagoya Protocol, and I compared the. It turns out the annual assessments are based on per capita gross national income with equity adjustments, and so I regressed. So anyway, I calculated the marginal tax rate. It's just like an income tax. So I compared the marginal and average tax rate. And that gave me a measure of revealed ethical preferences for progressivity. And lo and behold, UN, almost utilitarianism, CBD, These are all statistically significant. Almost utilitarianism, Nagoya Protocol, utilitarianism. What that means is that the concern is for the greater good, not for the actual allocation among states parties, individuals, nature. All right. Now that's going to turn out to be good for the biodiversity folks in a certain way. I'll tell you about in a moment. So then I calculated a social discount rate. And so there's that includes project risk and economic growth risk. And I got really small numbers. It includes that inequality aversion parameter, which is small. Now, so the discount rate is like really, really small, all right, for the CBD and Nagoya Protocol. And so this reflects very strong international ethical preferences for intergenerational equity, but also for biodiversity conservation, for far future nature. Now, what this says is you're balancing nature in the future almost the same as you balance now. So this really this says let's conserve. There's really strong revealed ethical preferences for conservation as a consequence. And so for examples, species with long-term value, slow-growing species, all right? It really favors slow-growing species. Rewilding, large-scale restoration, 30 by 30, gene banks, because the near utilitarianism is basically saying that the CBD and Nagoya Protocol really care about the long run. Unfortunately, they don't care a lot about, you know, the distributional consequences here and now. And finally, I'm going to wrap it up, but it's here if anybody wants to look at it. I went and looked at some benefit sharing among some of the major treaties. So just a few parting thoughts. Again, this is kind of an exploratory lecture. I've been especially exploring the concept of inequality of opportunity and structural disadvantage to states, but I think it's pretty relevant for global North-South because this is a common refrain you hear about is the inequality and structural disadvantage they have to participate equally with parity in the global system. So I think it's personally, I think it's a very promising way to start framing these concerns within a very strong ethical framework, all right, fairness framework. That's been starting with John Rawls, Ronald Dworkin, Ur Cohen, UCSD's Arneson, and then major economists and the economists got hold of it, basically mathematized it, and then some other guys got hold of it, started figuring out how you estimate this stuff. So it's the fairness, and what this says is that the fairness and equity in the global commons is as much about inequality of opportunity and structural disadvantage. It's not simply consequentialist ex post distribution. How do we make everybody equal after the fact? It's deontic. How do we think about it in terms of the initial allocation, leveling the playing field? The Common Heritage of Humankind principle, properly operationalized, requires compensation. They call it ex ante compensation for the circumstances that constrain the state's parties and their cosmopolitan capacity to participate and benefit. The empirical finding that the structural disadvantage explains almost everything of observed income across multiple treaty regimes. That says it's not a niche concern. It's an institutional feature of international institutional design. Economic capacity and infrastructure account for a lot of it. Now, parenthetically here, I mean, this is all fine and good, but it's well beyond what an international organization can deal with, all right? But it really says that the state's party capacity to take part, to enjoy, to fully participate, really counts. And it's well beyond the purview of any international organization. Vulnerability and environmental exposure are important. Human and natural capital played a much smaller role. On the individual level within states, human capital is really important. That's why education is such a big deal. And this is the last slide. Addressing these structural constraints, limiting participation, and benefiting from the global commons is a fundamental requirement for global fairness and equity. That all falls out of this inequality of opportunity concept. All right, that's it. Thank you very much. A long lecture. John.
Great. So if you're like me, then your mind is buzzing and you've got lots of thoughts and questions that you'd like to put to Dale. So Stephen's going to do the online ones. Is that right? Is there anyone in the room to start with?
And my hearing's really bad now, so you got to speak up. Right? Comes with this hearing.
Should I yeah.
If you can just speak to this, it means the online audience can hear you as well. Thanks.
Hi, Dale. Thank you so much. That was super interesting. Completely new topic to me. I'm therefore very sorry if this question is completely wrong or bizarre or in the wrong direction. When you're looking at inequality of opportunity, I keep coming back to that picture of the people running the race. Does it necessitate a kind of starting point and setting a starting point to then?
You're trying to get everybody on the same starting point.
Oh, sorry.
No, you've got your own.
I got this.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a good picture, right? It basically says people are starting in a staggered position, not because of a circular track. On a straight track, they're starting in a staggered positions. And it says on a straight track, we want to get them all on the same line with the same starting point.
Right. Okay. So wait. So when you're saying kind of look from, I guess when you're looking at individual states and saying there's inequality of opportunity between these states, are you saying that that's from like a set point in time, like that there's been that? Okay. And then how do you decide when that is? Or
good question. The biggest problem, I mean, you know, it's really beyond the purview of international organizations. I mean, they're there to manage something much more narrow and focused, all right? But there are things they can do. So you can, but again, international law and this Pareto constraint or the impasse point, meaning no state's going to take a loss, all right? I'll give you an example. I was just dealing with Indian Ocean stuff. We had a workshop in Set. And so they're the small island and coastal developing states. They want more fishing opportunities. And the French and the Spanish fleets are fishing on the high seas and fishing within their exclusive economic zones, all right? And these states are saying, we want more quality. They're basically saying we want more equality of opportunity to fish. So, all right. So, and you know, they have an allocation committee and they're trying to say, wow, these states are getting screwed, you know, and they deserve more opportunity. Well, I mean, if you're French or Spanish, now, if you're on a national delegation, okay, I mean, I've been in all these national delegations, all right? So you've got all kinds of interests in there. You got green groups, but you got industry too, all right? And industry guys are saying, I'm not going to take a loss. And fishing's a tough business, by the way. All right, it's a really tough business. And so they're saying, I'm not taking a loss. And so the delegation is going to say, I'm not going to take a loss. And so what do you do? So then you get into the hard constraints. So that's this Pareto constraint. Nobody can take a loss when it's consensual or democratic unanimous voting, right? It really sets a constraint. And the second thing is that, so what are you left with? Well, the states parties, the coastal and small island developing states, they have exclusive economic zones. So they can charge more for access, all right, than what was currently. The French and Spanish fleets were fishing there, and they wanted to allocate by precedent, a historical catch. And these states can say, nah, we don't care. You're fishing in our waters. So they can charge more. All right. But then they're going to say, I want to be able to fish on the high seas. You should share the rewards out of that. What are the French and Spanish going to say? Go get a boat, and which they can't. All right. It's a complex operation doing these things. So the public international, so you can talk about all this stuff, but these Pareto constraints and public international law are and then, the other thing is, I forgot to mention, it sounds really mundane. When you come up with these rules and regulations, monitoring and enforcement and compliance are huge. You got to be able to enforce this stuff, and it's self-enforcing. Countries enforce themselves. You violate, even if they admit, they have to go self-enforce. Nobody can do anything about it. It can be blatant.
Wow, that's really interesting. Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, well, I had one question, which is about the empirical work, which is, can you just clarify for everyone what your dependent variable was? So what was it that you were actually predicting using these?
I took per capita gross national income, all right, and I took it And it was a geometric mean of the last 4 years. So I come out of fishing where revenues they bounce around like ping pong balls, all right? So we smooth everything out. And then this included COVID as well. So I took the last 4 years, I took the geometric mean. They were in constant dollars. Everything was came out of the mostly World Bank. So things were use the Atlas method, takes care of exchange rates, and they were in dollars. But I used a special drawing rights deflator out of the IMF to get constant dollars. And then so I regressed this 4 years geometric mean average, and I regressed it on mean years of schooling, lagged the lag over 4 years average, like 2016 to 2016, 17, 19. Okay, because otherwise it's an endogenous variable. So you can't regress an endogenous variable on an endogenous variable, and mean years of schooling is a choice variable. So if you do that, you get biased and inconsistent estimates. So I took lags of those. So I took the previous 4 years, and that gives me a predetermined variable. So I get nice properties. So I took lagged mean years of schooling, the life expectancy, and then for the natural capital, I had the percent of forest land, percent of I think agriculture. I had the EEZs.
But how do you get that to being, sorry, the different treaties? So when you say that they're more or less equality.
Okay, so it's for each,
So,
I did it
yeah.
for each treaty.
Yeah.
And then I got a prediction.
But what's the actual, is it, I think we've talked about this before. So I think it's actually the contributions to the treaty.
No,
Yeah.
no, that was when I calculated the relative inequality
Exactly,
aversion
that's the one. Yeah, yeah.
That's the different memberships in the treaty.
Membership fees.
So
yeah.
when I did the this relative inequality aversion parameter, that's in economics we call it the elasticity of the social margin utility of income. It's related to a social welfare fund, but it's a progressivity parameter. 0 means it's utilitarianism. If it's as large as infinity, it's John Rawls' difference principle, and it can be between 0 and infinity. So I took I went back for each treaty. For the UN, I went back to 1980. And for CBD and the Nagoya Protocol, I went back to the beginning. And I laboriously by hand copied in each member contribution. It's all public information. And then I matched it with constant dollar per capita gross national income. And they all use the UN formula, which is it's all based on per capita gross national income with various kinds of progressivity adjustments. And so I just did a simple regression. Okay. Now I ended to use Driscoll-Cray errors because I tested for heteroscedasticity and serial correlation and cross-sectional independence. They violated all of them, so I got the right standard errors on these things. And out of that, I got it's simple linear regression. The slope coefficient is the marginal tax rate. And I just calculated the average and compared the two. There's a little formula. And the further the marginal from the average, the more progressive it is. In this case, and even when you plot it out, you look at it, the marginal and average are almost on top of each other.
Cool. We'll have one more question from Sandra, and then conscious of time, the fact that there's drinks for more chats. But Sandra, if you'd like to give your question, then yeah.
Thank you very much for your talk. You put your finger on the tension, as I see it,
Oh, yeah.
between, let me see if I have the term. I'm an ecologist, so I know little about economy and the law.
We're in the same boat by symmetrically.
Right. But you helped me put names, technical names to things I've seen. The tension between the states as the only persons that can actually get some traction in these treaties, and the interest of the cosmopolitan,
Exactly.
right? Which are, in a way, the ones that look after or are more worried about the common human heritage, right? To me, that's an almost irreconcilable tension. And we don't have to go to the outer space. I've seen it in some really, really tense conversations about the seabed exploitation,
yeah.
in which you have the ISA representing the countries that want to exploit it now. They want a share in the benefits now. And the cosmopolitan interest that say, look, we want to preserve our common heritage. All the evidence from science means that we don't need these resources right now. And we know for sure that we are destroying things right now that are impossible to reconstruct. And I've seen these tensions playing, real time. And I wonder, what are your reflections as a key player on that?
I can talk forever on this stuff.
Oh,
So-
okay. We can, yeah. All right.
All right, I'll make it really fast. First of all, I didn't tell you about all the little tricks I had to do. So I fell into the geometric mean index because India was getting, China was getting everything, okay? And these little states are getting nothing. So first of all, geometric mean index is the right way to go. But the other thing is it compresses your data. Otherwise, it's really skewed. So it compressed it, okay? So that was a little trick I did. And then the other thing is I use this inequality of opportunity weights to shape the rules, deontological. And then I use equity metrics to measure the outcome, how equal it is among the state's parties. And it turns out they're all about, all the different approaches are about. And I use all kinds of fairness concepts, not just the ones I talked about. There's 6 of them I use. So I did some technical things to balance those things. Now, in terms of the ISA, they're at an impasse. You've got about 40 states that say, let's either don't do it or a moratorium. The rest of the states would rather do it. And so what's happening, I think it's going to tear apart the ISA. Right now, the US, all right, the US never ratified Law of the Sea. So it doesn't hold. On the international treaty world, if your country doesn't ratify it, it doesn't hold. And even if it ratifies it and they come up with a rule, if you do an objection, it doesn't hold. I've seen it happen, right, in the tuna commissions. So what the US has done is they have authorized the mining company, and I know at least, I know some of these mining guys pretty well. I know at least one other company is also going to look for US to be flagged under the US, all right? And they will be able to legally mine in the Clarion-Clipperton zone, all right? Because UNCLOS doesn't hold under them. Now, some states argue that under customary international law, that's not right, but that'll get blown away. The other thing that's going to happen is you are seeing, I know in the Cook Islands, there's a couple other places, I don't remember them all. I think Nauru and Niue, but I can't remember everything. They are going to authorize mining within the EEZs, okay? Now, within the EEZs, they can do whatever they want. But here's the problem. If you don't have a unified mining code, then if you have a unified mining code, you're going to have a minimum floor international standard, okay? Otherwise, you're going to see some states with standards that are going to be less, all right? So that's another danger. Besides, so I think if I personally think that if the ISA doesn't get a mining code, that mining is going to happen. If you look at the demand for, remember, these are critical minerals, okay? The demand for critical minerals are projected to increase from 400 to 600%. And more, I don't know, most of these mining companies are not going to be profitable. It doesn't matter, because mining processing and just mines themselves are concentrated among a very few number of countries. And so countries are going to want a diversified supply of critical minerals. And that means the deep sea bed. And so it's going to happen. So you're left with, do you shoot for the moon, or is perfect enemy of the good? It's now we're into my personal beliefs. My personal beliefs, I remember I think you had a fish, I think you had a mine. Oh my God, that's the side of the equation I've been on, okay? But you do it responsibly, all right? Is the most sustainable way you can. These things are going to happen no matter what. So the question is, you want to minimize sea turtle mortality, you want to have good regulations to offsets? I got those things done, by the way. Or do you, if it's mining, it's going to happen. So let's do it responsibly. But I'm pro miner, okay? Most of you are probably not. All right.
Dale, got one.
I should have worn a black coat.
Um,
The
so
Darth Vader.
we'll,
I
we'll,
should have
we'll,
worn-
part, we'll
you know,
part this for the drink,
first
but
time
we'll have one more from online because we haven't done online yet, and I think you'll like this one. So thank you for sharing your valuable seminar. I've heard a framework that treats nature as natural capital, an asset to be managed for human benefit, but doesn't this commodification create a fundamental blind spot? By defining nature as a resource rather than a party with standing, we ignore its intrinsic limits and agency. Is it possible that the damages we see globally aren't market failures, but the logical result of a system that refuses to recognize non-humans as entities with their own rights to benefit sharing? Humans are not the only ones at the table. If nature is providing the benefits, why is nature not a legal party?
Well, coincidentally, Saturday, EJ and I are working on a paper on legal rights for nature in international organization. So do you know Trees Without Standing by Chris Stone? I was friends with Chris, okay? I did a bunch of stuff on the oceans with Chris. And I was always rumbling around in my head. And so then once I learned international legal personality, then all of a sudden, these bells started going off. And so I realized, well, look, you can do these. It requires international legal personality for nature to have standing. Now, so you can do it within a, say, CBD. It will be a derived standing, a derived international legal personality, because it has to be through the state's actions. Now, how do you implement? Well, Chris said a guardian. Okay, now what does a guardian mean? Well, it probably means some kind of committee. And this is the kind of stuff we're going to be talking about, writing about. So you can give rights to nature, all right? But under international law, it's not going to be primary rights. They're going to be secondary derivative rights and standing, okay? It's always going to be below states. It's just, doesn't matter if you like it or not. That's the way the world works. But you can then go on and create a guardian council that gives pushback and empower it with some kind of power. And that'll be the question, and it'll evolve over time and by trial and error. And then, and do they have veto power or not? But they can at least weigh in and represent nature, all right? And in the deliberations, they will have derived standing, but they can sit at the table with the state's parties, all right? At a minimum. And then do they have veto power or probably not? States aren't going to give that up. But they can at least speak with a voice. And then the question becomes who comprises it, all right? So you'll see civil society. I personally think industry should be at the table, all right? I think you want everybody there. Why? My experience has been, if you don't get consensus, if you don't get all parties involved, I've done a lot of negotiation internationally and nationally. And if all parties are not at the table for the discussions, it's not considered fair. It's not impartial. Now, you may not get what you want, all right, in these negotiations. I've seen this happen plenty of times. But at least if it's been impartial and transparent and people have had a voice in what goes on, even if you, and nobody expects to get everything they want, you get a lot more compliance. So I think you would have civil society, some scientists. I personally think you should have industry there. You want all voices. And because you're gonna have to deal with industry no matter what. So deal with them at the start. And then they'll get voted out by majority anyway, but at least they'll have had their say and they'll have tempered the conversation, right? It's gonna pop up sooner or later. It's better to have it in the process than having a country whose industry is powerful that blocks it at the end. Because you always have this Pareto constraint. So you have a guardian comprised, and they sit at the table. They have derived legal personality. And over time, I've forgotten, but there's actually a couple international organizations that have some of these derivative committees that actually have some power. But over time, I would expect, it'd take the international organizations work really slowly, okay? They meet once a year, my God, and they talk and then nothing happens and they come back. And but over time, I believe that you'll see these things shape. And if things work out right, nature will have a stake at the table with some power and a voice. It's always going to be subject to the states. I mean, you can't get around it. But it'll change the tenor and the nature of the debate at the table. So,
Super, thank you. So that has been super interesting, and I'm sure we've got lots more that people would like to talk to Dale about over drinks for the next hour or so. But I'm going to let the people online go and those who need to go elsewhere. Just before you leave, just to remind you that next week's seminar is called Designing Conservation Science for Decisions, and the speaker is Leah Gerber, who's a visiting fellow here and also a professor at Arizona State University. So hopefully many people will be there. But for now, let's say thank you very much to Dale.
Yeah.